I suspect you would probably agree that if the Japanese wish to remain the majority in Japan, they have a perfect right to do so. I suspect you would agree that the Tibetans have the right to remain the majority in their country if they wish to remain so. Why is it illegitimate if the French, for example, wish to remain a majority forever in their country?
I'm not sure that I necessarily agree that setting up the structure of your society based around any particular race is healthy. I mean, I haven't seen...
No. Answer my question. Why? I assume it's legitimate for the Japanese to wish to remain a majority in their country. Would you agree or disagree?
I'm not sure that I agree with that.
Oh, okay. So you think that it's illegitimate for Japan to wish to remain majority Japanese, and that morality requires that they let Filipinos and Iraqis and Iranians come into their country in how many numbers? Make them 10%, 15%? What's your prescription for Japan?
So I haven't said that I agree that Japan needs to take in other people. You've asked me, do I agree that Japan should have specific...
The right to remain Japanese. You say it doesn't.
Well, I mean, it's
now,
so Japanese...
You say it doesn't.
Japanese is a nation, is a national identity rather than a racial identity.
It is very much a racial identity as well. In their case, race and identity are very tightly bound. Do you think that, for example, Israel has the right to remain majority Jewish? Or should they reject this as part of their identity and let Arabs, let blacks, let anyone in? I mean, look, I think you're in a very difficult situation now because you're having to try to maintain what you think is a consistent stance, but it's a consistent stance which, when turned against a non-white group with a healthy sense of identity, obviously is absurd. So you find yourself in a logical contradiction, so you're struggling to come up with some way to explain why, well, maybe the Japanese, well, it's a problem for you. The same would be for, Turkey or Nigeria or any majority non-white country. You have an instinctive sense that it's okay for them, but somehow, if the French want to remain the majority, and that means keeping out Arabs or Africans, then somehow that's bad.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that I'm saying it's okay for anyone to prescribe their national state based on a particular race. I'm not even sure that the divisions between races are particularly useful marcations of personhood. I mean, I think it's
particularly useful. They're extremely salient in the eyes of blacks, Asians, everyone else. You can say they're not useful, but they are very real, they are very powerful, and much as you may try to negate them or laugh them off, they are very, very real to people, and it's because, unlike the fashionable view, this is a biological fact, not some sort of sociological optical illusion that would suggest somehow the differences between pygmies and Eskimos or Danes and Tierra del Fuegians is some kind of trick that we play on ourselves.
No,
this is a result of evolution.
Entirely. I mean, if you were to look at, say, apartheid era South Africa, one of the tests that they would have, you'd have black people had to be kept away from white people. One of the tests that they had in order to determine whether you were black or white was called the pencil test, whereby they would put a pencil in your hair, and if it was curly enough to hold the pencil in place, you were deemed to be black and therefore moved into a black area. And one of the reasons they had that test is because there was no other good, as they would see it, way of distinguishing in a society that has been mixed for generations, who counted as black and who counted as white. So you had the families being separated because this child was deemed to be black and this child was deemed to be white as a result of this pencil test. The boundaries between race are it's a much more blended area than we'd like to think when we want to be biological essentialists and say, well, this is exactly what someone is, and it's coded by biology.
There has been miscegenation for hundreds of years. As a consequence, you do get some ambiguous cases.
I mean,
for the most part,
it's probably around 50,000 years or something.
No, for heaven's sake. For 50,000 years ago, human beings were in widely separated areas, and there was no miscegenation going on. Race was established because of separate evolution that went on, as I say, in some cases for as long as 200,000 years. It's only in the recent era, with sea transportation and movements of populations, Africa, for example, it was very much isolated south of Sahara for a long time. America was isolated in a profound way until 1492. No, miscegenation is a relatively recent phenomenon, and for that reason, you get mixes that are difficult to pin down. There's no question about it. But for the most part, we have very little difficulty distinguishing a white person from a black person from an Asian. And to come up with some sort of rare case in which it's ambiguous or hard to decide, that does not negate the importance and the powerful identifying aspects that people bring to race. People think of themselves, by and large, as the members of a particular race. And there are some ambiguous cases, but that does not negate the reality, both biological, cultural, and psychological of race.
So you say that people consider themselves members of a particular race, and this is something that I kind of wanted to come back to as you talk about white identity, and you say in one of the videos I saw of you talking that being white is an important part of your identity. Why do you think it's so important for, I guess, the sort of political right to focus so much on identity politics in this way?
It's not the right that focuses on it. The right in the United States is the only group that tries to pretend that identity politics doesn't exist. In the United States, it's very much the left that is talking about black people or Hispanic people and that kind of consciousness, that Hispanic people should vote for Hispanic candidates, blacks should vote for black candidates, that we're going to kick out the old white patriarchy. No, the right in the United States is the only group that still pretends that somehow we can have this civic patriotism that unites all Americans and we're going to transcend race. Nobody else believes that.
But you must accept that white identity, white supremacy, white separation, these are white identity politics. The idea that we need to keep whiteness as a culture separate, the need to preserve white identity, that is in itself a supremely identity politics position.
Well, it's no different from the same views that are advanced every day with absolutely no criticism by all non-white groups. Yes, of course, that's what I said before. Whites have legitimate interests that others will cheerfully trample on. You say that it is somehow a conservative or a of the right idea. And what I'm explaining to you is that it's not that idea at all. The idea that the United States, we can all be colorblind and live happily ever after, that is a dwindling idea that is supported by people like National Review, the neoconservatives. The left doesn't believe that at all. The left understands perfectly well that their interests lie in naked ethnic nationalism, and it is only whites who are criticized if they take the same view. Now, you seem to be suggesting that, you use the term white supremacy. I would suggest that you retire that from your vocabulary. White supremacy is a historic phenomenon that did exist. White supremacy implies that whites wish to rule over people of other races. I don't think there's probably a single white supremacist living in the United States today. I have certainly never met one. People who take my view just want to be left alone. We want white people to have the opportunity, just like everyone else, to pursue our own destiny in the name of our own heritage, free from the embrace of people who are unlike ourselves. Nor do I insist or suggest that every white person should want to do that. If there are white people who want to live in some multicultural society, if they like living around black people and Hispanics and they want their children to marry outside their race, God bless them. That is a minority. And that minority should not take some sort of position of moral superiority over those like myself who believe that white people have a wonderful culture that we have created and that we have the right to pursue our own destiny free from influences, free from domination, numerically, politically, or in any other way by other people. And what is wrong with that?
So I think there's a couple of things you said there. One that you said, if there are people who are happy to live alongside people from different races and to have, to live and love and stand side by side, you said that's a minority of white people who believe that. But on what basis do you say that the majority of white people don't want that?
I look at how they behave. when the neighborhood school becomes majority Mexican, why is it that white people somehow disappear? And why is it that when white people somehow disappear, they turn up again in some area where whites are still the majority? Why is it that even the most raving liberal pundits in the United States who talk about diversity, when you look up the zip codes of where they actually live, well, lo and behold, they live in 95% white areas. Hillary Clinton's a perfect example. She and Bill were jabbering nonstop about how the United States becoming majority non-white was going to be this great challenge, this great step forward for mankind in America. Where do they live? They live in Chappaqua, New York. That's about as white a place as you can find this side of Iceland. These people are profoundly hypocritical. Look at what they do, not look at what they say.
Yeah, so what they do, I think that's a good way of looking at this. So you can say that Hillary Clinton isn't living in a black neighborhood. She's not living in the Bronx or anything. But is that a function of her not wanting to hang around black people, or is that a function of class and income dictating where people live? So obviously you have an issue with especially with an immigrant population would come in. They aren't going to be living necessarily in the most affluent of neighborhoods. They're going to be living in the places that can be afforded, and so this is why when you have a gentrification of people with more wealth moving into an area that's poorer, the poorer people have to move out.
Believe me, we now have suburbs of Atlanta, of Washington D.C., of quite well-to-do black people, and they have the purchasing power to live in a white neighborhood if they wanted to. Very frequently, they do not. They want to live in a neighborhood where their children will get to know and play with other black children. And so my point is they make the same choice that white people do. And if Hillary Clinton wishes to live in an upscale black neighborhood or an upscale mixed neighborhood, there are such neighborhoods. Now, I cannot read her mind. I can't tell you why it is she lives in Chappaqua. But I suspect the fact that it is overwhelmingly white is one of the contributing factors to making it a very pleasant, peaceful, safe place to live, and that's why she lives there. Now, she has Secret Service protection. She could live in the middle of Harlem and not have any fear of being mugged or having her windows broken out. She would have no fear of that at all. So if she wanted to make some kind of dramatic integrationist statement, she could do so without paying the price that the rest of us would pay for such a dramatic statement. The fact is, you can meet the most rabid, frothing liberals. Not one of them will voluntarily go live in a black neighborhood, despite the fact that they will tell you that integration is a profoundly important thing for America. They are the most contemptible hypocrites.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's necessarily true in all areas, but I recognise we're sort of heading through the interview and probably don't have time to go into a huge amount of depth.
Well, show me some examples. Give me some examples. Give me some examples of some prominent liberal white person who preaches integration who lives in a black neighborhood. Just give me one.
Well, I don't think it's about picking out a liberal celebrity and say, let's look where they live. But I think if you look at, for example, large parts of London, the more bohemian areas, which typically lean towards being liberal in nature, equally are more ethnically diverse. So the parts of London which do have that kind of liberal spirit actually have a reasonable amount of ethnic diversity. They aren't the most celebrity and wealthy people in the country, but they are people who are liberal.
And chances are the white people who live there are childless single people. And as soon as they marry and decide that they're going to start a household and rear children, I suspect they find someplace else to live. And I wonder why that might be.
And we could speculate as to why that might be. Certainly the best schools in the country, the ones with the best funding and the best Ofsted reports tend to be in areas of middle class and wealth. But anyway, we'll move on. You mentioned that you need to preserve white culture. I'm very interested by what you see as white culture. What is white culture?
The culture of Europe.
Which is
what? What? I mean,
what do you see as being the culture?
What? What? Are you seriously asking that question?
I'm asking what you see as being the culture.
Music, art, literature,
So
forms of government, all of this Western civilization.
Yeah,
this has come out of Europe. I mean, why is that mysterious to you?
Well, I'm interested. So you bring music up there, and depending on what music you mean, it's very hard to find an element of music as a culture that doesn't draw from multiculturalism, that doesn't have roots in black blues music and various
Wait. Beethoven, Bartok, Scriabin.